I don't come as a photographer. I come as a friend.
I didn't decide to be a photographer. I just happened to fall into it. Hey, welcome to the Street Shots Photography Podcast. This is Antonio.
And this is Ward.
And this is episode 227 for the end of March, and also for the western part of Maryland? Apparently.
Right.
Yes,
area code 227
Maryland.
Is Western Maryland.
Area 227 is Maryland, yeah. It says area code 227 serves the same geographic area as 240 and 301 in Maryland, including parts of or all of Aspen Hill, Bethesda, Bowie, Frederick, Gaithersburg, Germantown, Hagerstown, Potomac, Silver Spring, Waldorf, and Wheaton.
Cool.
So this is a good way for us to learn about area codes, is to just keep recording our shows.
Geography. Well, get to some more Canadian ones coming soon, I hope.
We had one. At least we had one.
We had one, yeah. We need more. We've got one or two, I think, we've run over from those.
Are there area codes there that are lower numbers that we might actually get to? Do you know?
I think we hit 204. That's Manitoba.
Oh, that was Manitoba.
Yeah, 204.
But we didn't mention that, did we? When did we start this crazy stuff?
Oh, true enough. Yeah, I don't know.
212, I think, right? Might have been 212.
Yeah, that's right. 212. Yeah. Anyway,
I think so. Yeah.
So that's maybe that's where we started, because that was, we were talking about the whole dialing in or whatever. Anyway, so
yes. Anyway,
I have a question.
Okay, why?
Am I on the show this time?
Are you on the show? We talked about this. we had a discussion about this, and we decided that you're not on the show.
Okay, I'm here now.
But you're on the show now. You're here now, but you're not
on the show now.
Later.
So you woke me up.
Well, now is what counts.
To bring me in to do an intro, and then I can go back to bed. Is that what we're saying?
You go back to bed. Yes, you get.
Okay. Okay.
Just get the heck out of.
Cool.
You are on the show now, but you won't be on the show later, and then you'll be back on the other shows sometime. So yes, this is not about you being on the show or not. This is.
Okay.
Well, anyway, yes, people are going to be looking at us saying, "Oh, we didn't bring our beers." Well, that's okay. Probably better off just saying no.
I'll have. Well, not that it makes much difference. It won't make me sleep anymore because it's got no alcohol in it. So
Right. Yeah.
It's not going to help that way.
It's just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll have it after we record. So yes.
Sure.
Well, wait. Okay. So back to we're 227 for the end of March 2025. Right. So we got that set.
Yeah.
We got the area code. Here you are on the screen with me, and what's going on today? So we decided to try something different. I can't remember if we mentioned this in the last show. So, when my friend Keith Goldstein was on the show a few shows ago. I think it was a couple of shows ago. I can't remember now. After the show was done, he suggested that I should be interviewed on our own show. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And he says, I'd like to interview you on your show. It's like, let's turn the tables a little bit. I don't know what that's going to be like. I was really curious about it, but I thought that was a good idea. So
cool.
Fast forward to today. Today is we're recording this way ahead of the time that we're releasing it. So we'll talk about that in a minute in terms of where we'll be. But today was Keith and I set up. Oh, so when he said interview, I was thinking, gosh, I really rather not sit in front of a screen and be interviewed. And then it just popped in my head that we should do a walk and talk in the city, because Keith and I were trying to get together for doing a photo walk last week, and we didn't get around to it. And so I bounced this idea off of you, right? to make the next show, which is this show, the recording of our interview. So I ended up asking him if he'd want to do it as a walk and talk, like we would bring our cameras, do a photo walk, and then talk, and he was into that. So we did that today. So yeah, so the rest of the show will be me and him talking, or he's actually asking me questions and we're talking as we're walking on the High Line in New York City. And you remember the High Line?
I do.
Probably
I got lots of pictures along there.
Yeah, probably one of the nicest places I think in the city to go to. Chose that because we figured it would be a little quieter in terms of like, just not walking the streets with sirens walking around, and we figured we might be able to get some people shots and stuff while we're walking around. So
there's interesting architecture along there, old and new, and glimpses of the skyline. You peek through buildings and see the Empire State Building. So it's very cool.
Yeah. You can also look into people's apartments. Should they leave up the shades?
That's their fault.
It's their fault, but okay. The other thing I wanted to mention to you is that the lights on that west side reminds me of a lot of the stuff that you guys have shot in Calgary. The light was bouncing off the glass and hitting the sidewalks and stuff like that. I'll show you pictures at some point. I'll probably put them in the show notes.
Sure.
But the light was bouncing all over the place because it's hitting glass windows and then reflecting off of other glass windows. So you have all this streaky kind of stuff. And I call it
crossfire lighting. Yeah.
It was definitely crossfire lighting. And I chose to walk around with, which I'd never do for street photography, but I decided this time was a 10 to 24 zoom. I really wanted to have the flexibility of wide lenses, and I'm really glad I did. I thought that ended up making a lot of shots that were nice. So I was shooting in black and white. Anyway, we walked for a couple of hours. Now I'm not going to put a couple of hours worth of our discussion. I'm going to edit it down. So don't worry if you guys are about to listen to this. I'm going to blow your ears off with a long conversation. So be aware that it'll be a decent, but it might be a tad long. I think what was interesting about it is I know that we've each talked about ourselves on this show, but it was funny to have him. Interesting to have him ask me questions sort of independent of, our little circle here, and he knows me from the outside world. And so he's been able to see my trajectory as a photographer and as a person, because we've known each other since, like I said, like 1989 or something like that. So it was interesting to have him come at me like that. And he opened up some questions that I got some insights into myself, which I thought was very interesting. So, and I think the walk and talk actually helped, because being in the process of, we weren't entirely making photographs. We were walking around because we were talking a lot. But I had my camera on, and he had his camera, and we would stop and shoot. But to be in that process of actually doing what we're talking about, I think is a lot different than, like, say, if we're sitting on a screen like this back and forth.
Yeah.
So, but
cool.
Yeah, that's, yeah. So I'm not sure how we introduce it, but, I guess this is going to be slightly different. We're not going to have a regular outro, so don't worry about that. And maybe let's just bring up what's going on for us in the next month before the next show. You're going to be...
Sure. I'm leaving on the 28th of March for Tokyo, Osaka, and Hiroshima, visiting my daughter, and we'll be walking the streets of those cities, and with a mind to a zine or a book or something, whatever comes out of it. So I'm coming back, I think, on the 9th or 10th of April.
When you get back, we can talk about that.
Yeah, I'll probably still be buzzed and jet lagged.
I'd love to Well, that might actually be a good time to debrief a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be all full of observations while it's still ringing in my ears and in my eyes. So, yeah.
All right. So let's plan for that. And then in that time frame, while you're away, I'm going to be going to Nebraska for about 5 days before you go. So I'll, was it before you go? I forgot what date I'm going. No, you'll already be there. You'll already be in Japan.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going. I forgot the date already that I'm going. But anyway, in your trip, I'm sandwiching in a 5-day trip to Nebraska. And one of the things I want to do there is to go scout out what kind of photography I might be able to do in a place which I would say is, I want to say the polar opposite of New York.
Yeah.
But I think it is, Yeah. And so it'll be interesting when we come back to debrief each other about our experiences. You're going to probably have a lot more because you're really just going there for
yes and no. But I mean, I go back to my hometown, and the whatever you want to call it, the hunting that you do isn't that much different. It's just that there are fewer subjects. But if you're going to be out in the country, it's a different pace. I don't think I'll have any trouble. Yeah.
No, I don't think I will. I'm just thinking it'll be really interesting to hear our experiences when we get back. So
yeah.
So I look forward to that.
That'd be good.
So
cool.
Yeah, and we can geek out technically too. Give everybody a heads up. We'll talk about our gear and stuff like that. But I really want to hear your experience. I'm really curious about that. So I'm sure
I'll have something.
I'm sure you will. So anyway, we've talked enough about the beginning. We're gonna get into the show. And Keith and I are walking and talking on the High Line, and I hope everybody enjoys this. I hope it has some insights a little bit more to why I'm a photographer. Hopefully, Ward, you will listen to it. And
I might listen to it on the plane.
Okay, yeah, and hopefully you'll learn something. So, and we want to open this up. By the way, Keith was talking about maybe interviewing you. So, unfortunately, that might have to be on screen. So, yeah, so we'll have to do with 3 of us. So we'll see. Anyway, that being said, let's just get into this. We're going to start at the High Line in front of a very big pigeon. So, hope you guys enjoy. We decided to come out and do a recording. It was your idea to interview me on my own show.
Right.
So that's interesting. I thought it was good for us to come out on this really, really nice day in New York. It's perfectly blue sky. Not that that's perfect for street photography. It's just nice that we can walk around and not be worried about rain. And we would do walk and talk. So, these recordings may not be the best. I got little wireless microphones on us, but you'll be able to. I think that it should be fine. It should be fine. We're up in the High Line now, which is in New York. If you haven't heard about it, I'm narrating to the audience here.
Right.
Sorry, but if you haven't heard about it, it's a raised platform that's on the west side of the city. It used to be trains, industrial trains that would hit up all the factories that are on the west side. They would sort of roll into the factories
and
unload and load stuff up.
One time, New York had all these ships.
Right, the ships on the west side. Right. So this was where the stuff came in. For a very long time after the train stopped, it became dilapidated and abandoned. And rather than taking it down, which would have been a hell of an undertaking if they took this down, they got money together and they turned it into a park. And it's been a park for, I don't know, it's a while now, I would say.
15 years?
Yeah, 15 years, maybe more.
I don't know.
And they've been building it over time. Actually, they finished it, they built it in sections. And I think, having been a New Yorker for all my life, this is one of the best things I think they've done.
Yeah.
It's turned this into this walking path park. We're above the west side, so we can look down on some of the avenues. We're going to do a walk and talk on this because we figured we can do our photography. There's a lot of people around here. Not as many tourists, but
to the audience, I've always respected Antonio's work, and I'm just curious how you started. What made you decide to pick up a camera?
So that's interesting. That's an interesting story, in a way. I mean, at least for me, because I've always had cameras. Every time I teach a class and I tell people how long I've been a photographer, they're like, I was like, since I was in 5th grade, but I'm not a photographer in 5th grade. But I had cameras then, the first Polaroid camera and stuff like that. But there was a time when I was photographing with an Instamatic. For those who don't know what an Instamatic is, go look it up. But for some reason, and I think it was before junior. I mean, it was junior high, early junior, 7th grade. I wanted to take better pictures. I kept trying to take pictures on my roof of the Empire State Building with Instamatic, and that's a exercise in futility, as it were, at night.
Yeah, everything's just fixed.
Yeah. Also, the film had no, had no speed or anything like that. And for some reason, around then, I decided that I wanted to take better pictures. There was something about that, and I don't know if it was my dad that was in town or something. I don't know. But my dad was a photographer, and
yeah, I seem to remember you mentioning that.
Yeah, he wasn't in town, and he wasn't a photographer then. But he told me I had to go to see his friend at All Kit Camera. So All Kit Camera was this camera store on 3rd Avenue and 52nd or 53rd Street. Can't remember the guy's name that he told me to go see. And he says, buy this camera, blah, blah, blah. I also had a movie camera at that time. I had a Super 8 Canon or something like that. And what I ended up doing was trading that in and getting a Pentax Spotmatic.
It was great. It was a great camera.
Yeah.
And a great first camera as well.
Yeah, it's everybody. It was always, back then it seemed like it was a Spotmatic or what was it? What was the one after that? A K1000 or something.
Right.
Like that.
Well, yeah, that came later.
Yeah, that had a different mount on the lens.
Right.
The Pentax had a screw mount. Yeah. I don't know if it was an M42 screw mount or whatever.
Yes.
Was it M42?
Yeah, I think so.
So that and a 50 millimeter lens, and then he told me, well, you got to photograph with this film, and then you have to go to my friend's studio, John Goretti and Stuart Roth and Alan J. They had the studio on West, just off of Broadway on 21st or 22nd Street, and he goes, go there and they'll show you what to do. And so I went there after school because my school was near there, so I went after school. And I was just sort of like an apprentice, and they showed me how to, each one of them. Actually, it was mostly this one guy, Stuart Roth, who showed me how to process film. And from then on, I was hooked as photographer. And then I ended up doing photography in junior high school for the yearbook, the typical story kind of thing. But to fast forward, I went, all my friends were going to Stuyvesant. They lived in Stuyvesant. They were going to Stuyvesant for high school.
Right.
And I didn't have
That's when it was on 15th.
On 15th Street, yeah. I didn't have the I didn't have the academic skills to follow them. And so when I was looking for high schools to go to, the High School of Art and Design popped up on the list. And it said, you could go there for photography. And it was kind of like a decision, like a default decision. It wasn't like I wanted to be a photographer. It was like, that's what I knew what to do. And I figured, okay, well, I could get in there and I could do photography, right? And of course, when I got there, it wasn't just photography. I had to learn math and all the other stuff. Right. But, so I didn't make a decision to be a photographer, at least then. I just did it because that's what I could do.
But then on graduating high school, I know you went to SVA.
SVA, yeah.
And then was it at SVA that you got your job at ImageBank?
Yeah, and I just worked there. I worked there as I worked in the files. We all started there.
Did you find yourself to be very influenced by what you saw there, or?
Yeah, I was influenced by. I guess I was influenced by the fact that I could be a photographer and make money at it.
Right.
and then like that's what I knew what to do. So again, it was kind of a default setting. Like I didn't make a decision like, oh, I want to be a photographer. It's like, oh, this is what I can do. I know how to do it. And look, I could probably make some money at it. So I was really kind of thinking about that at first.
You had gotten a contract based upon some images you took, I think, of the original World Trade Center.
Wow, you remember that?
Construction site, yes. In a way, a fortuitous event, in some way.
Well, what happened was they were building the World Financial Center there. So the buildings that were west of the World Trade Center. And ImageBank kept asking photographers to go photograph it. And I was paying attention to this. And so I went and photographed it.
Do you remember what year that might have been?
So it could be late 85, early 86. And so I went and photographed it. And I showed the salesperson, his name was Tim. Like it fits the requirement for the request that came in for the client. So I gave the salesperson my pictures, and they sold immediately for this cover of I think it was a brochure or some internal magazine or something like that. And it was my first tear sheet.
What a great way to begin.
Yeah, and it was actually for like $300 or $500.
Wow.
And I was like, that was like for
those were the days when
when I made
were higher.
They were higher, and also I was only making like $200 a week or something like that. So it was like a month's worth of my salary or something like that. I was like, and so I got the contract. They actually, I sold the picture first before I got the contract, but that got my started. I mean, it wasn't a very interesting picture. It was just like a shot up at the World Trade Center. I left room for type, but that kind of set my brain in commercial photography mode.
So I know you shot stock for quite a number of years.
Yeah, I've shot so much stock that I don't even know what to do with the pictures. So much, but if we fast forward a little bit, or a lot, I'm still kind of working that out of my system. Because when you're shooting commercial, especially stock, you're thinking about, okay, how are the pictures going to look? How are they going to sell? What do you have to make? Verticals and horizontals and all this other stuff that you pay attention to.
So what then compelled you to kind of stop?
I think what happened was it was a confluence of stuff. As stock started to decline a little bit and money started to drift away because there was the royalty free and the subscription stuff and all this other nonsense, I started making less and less money. And so my commercial photography was switching a bit. Yeah. The whole stock model changed.
Oh yeah.
Right. And it was kind of quick. And then we got into digital very quick as well. And things were shifting and the checks started diminishing. And me trying to also, that was sort of the time when video was starting to kick in a little bit. So me trying to get into video as well, like really still figuring out how to do money. Like money became not an obsession, because it's not a good word, because it sounds like I wanted money. Like,
well, no,
it was like I had to survive.
You have to live. You know.
I was so angry at Getty.
Because Getty really forced the whole change around 2000, around the end of the millennium.
Yeah, they kept telling us, you got to do that, you got to sign this, you got to take less percentage.
They changed the contracts.
I was angry at them for so long that I think that affected my ability to do any kind of commercial photography. I mean, I would do jobs that someone would, say, hey, I need someone to shoot an event or blah, 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 and I would do it. But I wasn't like actively doing commercial photography, like looking for it. I tried a bunch of times, but I couldn't do that, like bring my portfolio to the art director kind of thing. Like it just wasn't me.
All of a sudden this street work of yours started to appear, and looking at your technique, and I think we talked about it very briefly, but I don't know how it really came about.
Well, so any photographer, even if you're doing whatever kind of commercial work, if you're carrying your camera around with you, you will do street photography.
Yeah.
Right. Just because,
right.
Everyone does that. So I was doing that. I ended up buying, what did I buy? I bought a little Panasonic Lumix from this guy in Seattle. And I wanted a little point and shoot camera to be better than the iPhone that I was carrying around taking pictures.
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted something better than that. So, but I'm going ahead of myself here a little bit. What happened was I moved from Park Slope. We had to move from our apartment from Park Slope to where I live now. And it was basically exploring the area with cameras, with my iPhone or, whatever. I was also doing some work at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. I was doing their calendars. So that was some commercial work I was doing there when I moved. But when I was not doing anything, I would walk around the neighborhoods, sort of scoping it out. And I was using my phone to take pictures. And what I noticed was I live on Ocean Parkway, which has got benches where people sit and look at traffic.
Yep.
And so there's a whole culture of that. I mean, you grew up in New York, there's the stoop culture, right?
Yes.
People who sit on stoops, stoop culture is a whole thing. You sit on stoops and you talk and stuff like that. Well, the same thing happens on these parkways where there's benches. People sit and talk, and they're there. So I'm walking there, and I'm getting to pay attention to people sitting on benches. Yeah.
I guess I didn't think of that it coincided with you moving to...
It became something of, I want to say an obsession, but like I would go out and I would see these people and I would capture them with my iPhone, and I'd look and I'd be like, oh, that's really interesting. Also during this whole process, I would go to Coney Island and photograph during the Mermaid Parade. Mermaid Parades, before it became really popular and it became like a real parade.
Teeny.
They were teeny.
I remember going to one in the late 70s.
Yeah. Oh, that was, yes. They were
Early
certainly
80s. And
it was just a blip on the
it was
radar.
like 20 people.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden...
When I started going, it was a parade, but because I had a bunch of cameras around my neck, I get to walk in the parade with everybody. Like I didn't have to have a press pass or anything like that. And so that actually kind of like that kind of stuff, like the grabbing of people during an event like that, got me at least in the mindset of street photography. Now I tell my students, like, if you're nervous about starting street photography,
go to a parade.
Go to a parade. Go to a place where there's a lot of people.
People very open to being photographed.
Exactly.
And happy.
It also builds up your confidence.
Yeah.
Right. Because then you're in the whole mode and mood of the parade.
Right.
And so people will act for you. You act for them. I walked around Brighton Beach area underneath the elevated trains.
Right. Yeah.
Photographing. I just said, let me try this by just photographing people, and I would convert them to black and white, and I look at them and I was like, okay,
something here.
That's kind of that's the genesis of that. And to fast forward a bit more, it became an obsession. Like, the more I photographed people in my neighborhood or just like on my way to work or whatever it was, the more obsessed I got. So I would walk all up and down Ocean Parkway with the camera, photographing people sitting on benches.
Do you see a psychological component?
So expand on that a little bit more. So I can, what are you thinking?
Well, it's interesting because we'll take imagery. Of course, it's totally it's a visual thing,
right?
But then there's certain things, subjects you hit upon. Subjects that you hit upon, or the way that you see things that run deeper than just the visual moment.
Well,
and maybe I hope I'm being clear.
Maybe, I don't know. We can parse this out a little bit. So I have to remember that I'm highly influenced by a lot of the old time photographers. Right.
That was a component I wanted to ask. I mean, I don't like asking so much about influence, people who influenced you, but there's so many, it's a lot of great work. And I myself sometimes feel like I was born maybe 100 years later than I should.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And it would have been different for me if I was born 100 years ago.
Yes.
But
That's interesting. Having, I grew up in New York, right? You did too.
Right.
So we're going to museums all the time. I'm seeing these things, which as a kid I wasn't like aware of, but all those images are sort of getting stored in my quote unquote image bank in my head. I like to call it that now.
right.
So the influence is there, just kind of running always in the background. But because as I started getting more visually, this Western beef, right?
Oh, right.
Yeah. As I started getting more visually literate, I would say, and that photographer is this guy, or this one is that, and this is New York, and these are the places. So I'll go ahead and say, first of all, New York is my love, right? So anytime I saw pictures, old time pictures of New York or things that happened in New York, that was an influence to me because it was my area. I understood it.
Right.
So that would probably include street photography or, Berenice Abbott pictures or whatever, right? So that's always sort of running in my background. So when I move to where I live now, it's a little bit old world-y, if I can say that. So it harkens back to the time that I'm sort of resonating with the pictures that I see when I was growing up,
Right.
Ouija images. Not that, there are people getting murdered. You know what I mean? But like there's like this,
Right.
there's that 30s, 40s, 50s kind of thing going on in my neighborhood, and here it is like the 2000s, right?
Right. It's still there.
Yeah. So when I'm taking pictures of people, I'm seeing this old worldness that I resonate with a lot for some reason. Maybe you're 100 years outdated. Maybe I'm only like 50 years. Like maybe I should have been in the 30s or something like that, or the 40s. I think what's happening is that once I started to photograph these people, because it was just what I was getting into, I think I tapped into this sort of world, this timeless period in my head.
Yeah, but how many times do you walk by something and you go, there's something here, but not whatever the confluences of events, of lighting and weather or whatever, it's not coming together.
Doesn't come together.
Then all of a sudden you walk by for the 100th time and it's just like, there it all is.
Well, I think that would happen more often when I had a camera than like just noticing it with my eyes. The Dorothea Lange quote that a camera teaches people how to see without a camera, I think that really clicks with me.
Yeah.
I think that was the natural thing for me to be able to see how the place that I know so well, what it looks like through a camera.
There's always been arguments about what is street photography, or when did it begin, or who named it. When I come across you see this in Facebook groups. Someone posted recently, Joel Morrow, it's the father of street photography. And everyone wrote, huh?
Right. Well, let's just start hearing that. I say that in one of my classes about Bresson, right? Because I got to give them something, right? I don't necessarily believe it, but it's not, when I'm doing like a one-off class on street photography,
right,
and they're learning for the first time, it's really not the place to debate it. I also say the caveat, like, yes, maybe Bresson is considered the father of street photography. I don't like the name. I don't like that phrase, like the mother of all bombs.
But I didn't
the
even
father
think
of
it
street
even
photography.
goes back even further than him,
Yeah, sure it does. Yeah, but
I think it's just like a kind of a genre that is just because of what photography is in life, documenting. It
And
just
people just want to take pictures.
Right, just develop.
Yeah. Again, like when I'm teaching a class, I need to really put my finger in a map and say, okay, well, here's this guy, and things changed around him, perhaps, or
Right.
it became a head. It doesn't necessarily mean it's true, but I never pictured myself a street photographer, and I even hate that phrase. Like, I don't even know what it means.
Oh, I know.
It's just like I take pictures, right? I don't like labeling. I don't like labels, but again, like I'm in this education kind of world,
Right.
and that kind of requires it a little bit.
Yeah.
I think, at least I'm not in a university or anything like that. I'm just doing one-off classes, but I have to got to pick these little bits of context for the students to be able to grab onto. So, I do ask them. I say, "Do you think you can do street photography on a farm in Iowa?" And you see everybody's like sort of, they're thinking about it, and I was like, "Really? You really have to think about it?" But
Right.
they're new. But it's like, and some people say no. It's like, I said, "Well, what do you think street photography is?" I mean, does it literally mean walking on the streets? I mean, we just happen to be in New York, right? We happen to, there are streets here, right?
It's always, I found that funny, like in those Facebook groups, like street photography, and then someone posts a glamour shot of of someone in the studio, like, and now, and I've realized lately people are getting very annoyed about it. What does this have to do with street photography? It's not. If you want to post something like this, just post it elsewhere. It's not about this.
Yeah. Although I do think that people get a little too upset about everything these days, but that's neither here or there. And again, I would probably agree with that. But
go from your influences to podcasting.
Okay.
Why?
Yeah, interesting. So that started because my friend Tom, who I met at the coffee shop in my neighborhood, who's a pastor.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the coffee shop I still go to the same coffee shop. It's just under a different name. He had pictures up on the wall there of like hawks that he took in Greenwood Cemetery, and I would see him now and then. I think I knew it was his pictures. We befriended at the cafe, and from that we ended up talking about doing like photo classes. So we came up with switch to manual. Like, this was all his idea, by the way.
Oh.
Switch to manual. I was like, yeah, we could teach people how to photograph in manual, and I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. I was really into in fact, I wasn't teaching before that. So I was into, starting a little photo school where we'd teach people. And we would do these things. We'd do these photo walks in Red Hook in Brooklyn on the waterfront.
Right.
And we advertised through Groupon, and we would get people to come, and we would start our class at a bar called, what was it called? Red Hook Bait and Tackle.
Oh, I know that bar.
Yeah, because Tom knew the guy who owned it, and he was able to convince. He asked the guy if we could use the place early on a Saturday morning. And so we invited our students there. They pay us, and we had a little slideshow about how to photograph in manual. And then we do a little photo walk in Red Hook, and then we go back to the bar and have lunch. But that began to dry up. We were trying to promote it, but it was kind of a hard thing to do for us. And so I came up with the idea. I said, look, we have this desire to keep teaching. What if we just transitioned to doing a podcast instead? I mean, it would be free, and we're not charging anything for it, but it would get us the opportunity to maybe get our name out there again or something like that. So we started up in his basement because he lived in his church. He lived about a block away from me. So his church was not an ordinary church. It was actually a brownstone where the services were on the ground floor, and he lived in the top apartment. So he had a basement there, and so I had all the audio equipment. And I don't even want to listen to that first episode. There's a part of me that's really curious about it, but
you got to start somewhere.
I know. It's just, to see where we've come from. So we started up, I think we were doing it once a week or something. And it wasn't so regular because his schedule was our schedules were kind of weird. But it did sound like we were recording in someone's basement. But that's how that started. He was acquaintances with, you ever hear of Ron Haviv?
Yes.
Yeah, so he knows Ron Haviv. And we got Ron to be on the show. And we're talking about his pictures from Yugoslavia and stuff like that. And that was kind of really the kick. Like once I did that interview with Ron, I really, really wanted to keep doing podcasts. It just seemed like a really interesting way to talk about photography. And of course, talking about photography and describing pictures on audio is really a challenge.
Yeah.
But I think what it did was it kept me grounded in photography in some way. Because then I was not transitioning, but I was working at Brick and doing video stuff and basically trying to have a job. And I didn't really have a way to do photography on a regular basis. And so it did keep me in that. Did
Brick train you on the...
Yeah, on all video stuff?
Yeah. On cameras for TV. And...
Yep, all that stuff. I learned it sort of on the job.
Oh, that's great.
So, I mean, how to do that and then try to make money as a photographer. Like I would do jobs here and there, but I saw more life in video, you know. So but the podcast kept my foot into doing photography and talking about it. So that became more of a staple. And I think if I didn't have it, I would have just not. I don't know. That sounds dramatic, like I would go crazy, but I think I might have moved away from photography a little. You know,
have you thought about
moving away from photography?
Or stopping?
I thought about it. You know, I was thinking like, what am I doing now? Like, what? You know, maybe I've reached sort of I want to say a peak at my street photography. It doesn't mean anything really. It's just I've become sort of repetitive here, and like, I don't know what I want to, do with it. You know,
but that's interesting because it brings me back to. The person that I studied with at SVA, and he would think that would be important that you come to a point where you kind of feel, well, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, they'll be my word, but bored or tired. And how do you work through that?
Yeah.
And he would say that's an important thing to do. And I understand that because I've done that many times.
Yeah.
Or come to I don't want to say a crossroads
picture,
but
well, sometimes circumstances in life, you know.
Well, yeah.
Like after Elizabeth died, I lost all sense of wanting to do any kind of photography. Like I just really didn't care about it. Like I didn't care about a lot of things. Photography was certainly on my list of things that I really wanted to do anymore.
No, I understand that because you come up and all of a sudden you stop at a point in your life and you look back and you're thinking about things that you've done and you go, well, I don't want to say this is it. What have I achieved and what is still achievable and where am I going?
Uh-huh.
And then there is another kind of revelation where the work is and what you make is the journey, and it's not over until it's over.
Right.
And
it's
kind of, I always look at the work as like I could look back at an image and I know exactly where I was or even what I was thinking or feeling at that point in my life.
Yeah.
And
well, actually, what you're talking about sounds like kind of what I did with commercial photography or something like that. Like it found an end. Well, at least I thought I found an end. And rather than it being the actual process, like to be involved with the process and not worry about what was going to happen. But, circumstances in life, in my life, I should say, would be like, well, what are the practical things that I've got to do to make a living,
Yeah, but, it's interesting that the work you've done and how it transposed in and of itself. When doing more commercial stuff, doing more personal kind of work. I find that interesting, and what happens there? Why did that shift take place? So what happened to you, or what were you thinking about that caused that shift?
I was still angry about not doing commercial stock photography anymore. Like I felt like a victim. Now this is just my framing. It's not I'm not blaming anybody, but I felt victimized, and that's not a good frame of mind to be in, right? Because then everybody's doing things to me, even though they're not.
Right.
So I've got to work at Brick, right? I got to work on video, which I'm not thrilled at, but I can do it. I have to work at Shutterstock by looking at other people's work, not my own, right? Because I gotta do that. And in the meantime, what do I have for myself? So I've only got my camera, whatever camera I had with me at the time, and then it involved, from one camera to another. Cameras had a lot to do with this, but it kept my foot in the door. But I think I was still coming from this point of view of being a victim. And this was kind of the way for me to say F word.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to be a victim, and I'm going to continue to do my photography. And even if my wife gets angry at me because she wants me to get a job, right? And I have to pay the bills, I'm still going to be a photographer. And the world is telling me to stop doing it, right? And so I'm being very defiant.
Did you really think was telling you to stop?
Well,
or maybe,
yeah.
Maybe you should look at it and make a shift.
Yeah, but I wasn't thinking about it as an art form at that point. I was still thinking about it as, or an art form. It's not the right word. It's not art. It's just I was still thinking about it as a way to make money. It's okay, this is what I know how to do. This is what I know to do.
Right.
Right? So how am I going to get this and keep this? I bet Elizabeth was probably at her wit's end with me. Because when are you going to get a job? When are you going to take your photography skills and do something with them that will help us pay the bills? So I guess that was always an ongoing thing. Was making a living from the thing that I like to do. And since stock went away, stock was perfect for that, because I had a camera, I was taking pictures, and someone was giving me money for it. I was like,
right.
How better can that get? Ooh, I take pictures of clouds. Someone buys it for $6,000, puts it on the cover of a magazine or something like that. You know what happens when that gets taken away? And then, when that gets taken away, and then I'm there, I can't go back in another direction, You know how angry you get?
Yeah.
You know how angry I got?
Imagine.
Still acting it out. I think the one thing that I'm appreciative of is that I'm no longer, commercial photography is kind of a bust in general these days.
Oh.
Right? So I think everybody's in the same boat in that sense, or many people are. It's just not making photography as a living is not the same. I mean, there's the few people that float to the top who are still doing it, and you can make money at it, but I don't think you can make a living at it.
Yeah, I don't know.
So having that taken away means that now I can use my camera that has nothing to do with, I don't feel guilty. I mean, I would like to make money with my camera, but if I'm walking around taking pictures of what I want, street shots or, urbanscapes or whatever the hell you want to call it, I don't necessarily feel like I'm skipping out on something.
Right.
And I still have to make money, but I got other freelance jobs and stuff that I can work with, and
right.
Even that's not necessarily easy. But I certainly don't feel like that about my photography anymore. I feel like, well, that frees me up. So now I can take photographs of New York in a way that I don't have to think about, do I need to photograph vertical? Do I need to leave space for type? Do I need to, none of that stuff is happening anymore.
I can remember when I was younger and I had my grandmother had a nephew. He's one of her brother's sons. I never met him, but he had a studio in the city up here on 25th and Broadway. And when I first started going to SVA, she always used to go, "Oh, go see Jack, go see Jack." He'd be so thrilled. And I just knew he was I just knew he was a commercial photographer. And I didn't, at the time, I don't know, I didn't want to get sucked in.
Oh.
You know, but when I look back, I think it would have been okay. You know, why didn't I go? I was horribly shy back then.
Yeah.
And I regret never having gone by his studio. I'd walk by it and I look up and I see his sign, a little sign coming out of the building, and I never went. You know, I don't know what compels people to just stop. I've known people that just stop doing a thing that they love, and instead of somehow, maybe there's a way of working through whatever they're feeling, doing it.
Yeah. Well,
Just, I think it becomes more meaningful, or something comes out on the other side, obviously, that could be more meaningful than what you were doing to begin with.
well, yeah. And
You don't know.
you know, as you're saying that and thinking about like how to reinvent oneself, how do you reinvent yourself? And there are multiple ways people deal with it. Like you decide to just put on another hat and look at things differently. You change your location.
Change perspective.
Change
Sometimes, you know, it's funny. I sometimes change cameras just to have a different feel, because it makes me look at everything slightly differently.
Yeah.
Even though it's the same but different. I can't explain it. I have to think about a different way of working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I used to say that you don't have to be a world traveler to get like new and crazy pictures.
No.
But that being said, sometimes a change of locale will just shift a perspective.
Yeah.
You know, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so,
Well, you know, it's funny. Even a change of locale, sometimes just a change of boroughs. You know.
yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, no, even just change of neighborhoods. I mean,
Right.
like what I told you about, like when I lived in Park Slope, compared to the neighborhood that I moved in, they're like two different worlds entirely.
Yeah.
I certainly wasn't thinking of the kind of photography I was doing when I lived in Park Slope as to where I moved to in Kensington. So, yeah.
Well, you know, because I think, you
Wanna
know,
sit in the sun?
yeah. There are things that one does, like I sit at, you know, I'm working from home for so many years.
Right.
And, you know, all I have is like looking out. I sit next to an alleyway window, and that's, you know.
Right, that's your...
Right, and you start looking out of it.
That's your world.
And then I turn and I look out my son's bedroom window onto Broadway, and I see things happening with the light when the sun comes up, and, you know, and I said, well, these are photographic opportunities. You know, these are like, because you look like we were talking about at lunch, like someone like Joseph Sudak, and photographed so much. It's still live, just photographing the light coming through a living room window, falling on a chair and a table, a little vase and flowers.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. Like you really feel that moment, or what compelled him to take that image. It's not going to save anyone's life, but it's contemplative, peaceful, you know.
Part of me thinks that I know to reinvent myself, but circumstances in my life are going to sort of force some changes.
Yes.
And so it'll be interesting to see where that goes in terms of like the kind of photography that will follow.
Plus, not just in the area you're moving to, but even expanding it. What's outside that?
Right. So, yeah. So I don't know if I'm answering all your questions quite right, but
I don't know if my questions really have any answers.
yeah, there aren't.
I don't. I kind of wanted the answers to be more personal, not specific in a sense. You want to get.
Right.
You want to get to feel what of who the person is behind the images, or what their thinking process about how they do what they do. So I could ask specific questions. You've been doing this podcast thing for quite a while, and
it's about 13 years now.
Yeah, you've.
I think we started in 2012, but
you've talked to a lot of different photographers, and no one's ever talked about you and why you're doing this, or what made you want to do this. I mean, I could ask specifically, what kind of advice would you give to an aspiring photographer?
I say, don't do as I say, not as I do. Dude. Yeah.
Go into finance.
No, I'd never tell someone to do that. I really get disappointed when I hear people who start off with an artistic tendency and then it's not disappointed. That's not the right word, because that means I'm judging them. I know people are making decisions for whatever their life is. There's a sadness that comes in when I hear that creativity gets stymied because of realities. And I guess ultimately that's kind of where I'm at too. I get sad that I often cannot just be the kind of photographer I would like to be. There's always something still running in the background, my background reel that's telling me, so you gotta make a living.
This is interesting. So you don't feel that you are the photographer that you wanted to become?
Okay, I would say no.
You want it interesting? Because many years ago, I went to a lecture on his photography by Ralph Gibson, and he started crying and said during the lecture that he felt he never became the photographer that he wanted to be. And
to be perfectly honest, I mean, I was so wrapped up in commercial photography, and I actually did like it, and if you put that question to me back then, what would I wanted? Yeah, I would have wanted a studio. Yeah, I would have wanted clients. I would have wanted, all the stuff that I saw other photographers have. That was the photographer I wanted to be.
Interesting. What was why did you think that was attractive?
I don't know. I think it's just the world I grew up in. I think I grew up with a lot of commercial photography. I grew up with a lot of media stuff, but in the movie business and stuff like that, there's success. It wasn't like a bunch of people who are doing stuff for free or independent stuff. This was like big time stuff, and people were secure and stuff like that. And I guess I grew up with money insecurity.
Yeah.
So it would have been nice that I could have been secure with the kind of thing that I wanted to do.
Oh, I hear you.
So I think that was always the photographer I wanted to be. I always wanted to have the client list. I've always wanted to have the I can't do this today because I'm traveling. I see other photographers do that, and I interview some of them, and I'm still envious in some way. And I'm maybe some of them are envious of me. I don't know, but I think that's what I would have wanted to do.
Well, in looking at you and things you have accomplished to this point, I mean, you've been a commercial photographer. You've had work bought. You've sold prints. You've been published in local newspapers, and
right.
You've been published, period, through stock and everything. And you're doing this podcast, which I think it's great. I think it's I think it's really interesting that you have gotten some of these photographers to talk to you. So it hasn't been for naught, you know. People out here listen, Antonio.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that. You know, I never thought like even it's not the most successful podcast. No, that's not true. It's not the most listened to podcast, but there's still like hundreds of people who, like, if you were to tell me, like, I was in a room with like 600 people and they're all listening to what I'm saying and they're like, yeah, I like to hear what you're saying.
Well, what would make it more popular? Having it,
I don't know. I don't even know if that's the point.
Right,
you know?
being syndicated somewhere.
I don't know if it turned into something that I wouldn't want it to turn into.
Right, and then I'm sure, unfortunately, there's an audience out there, but it's not going to be a huge audience that wants to hear photographers talk about photography.
Right.
You know, if it was baseball or basketball.
Yeah, no, it's not going to.
You know, unfortunately,
it's not.
I think that would be unfortunate.
Yeah.
Be something else.
Yeah, it's not the place to make a living either. So I don't know. I'm still looking for it. I think I'm still looking for the.
Yeah, no,
still
I
looking
understand
for the
that.
photographer who's out there.
Well, I really want to give Antonio a big thank you for agreeing to speak to me.
I want to give Keith a big thank you for letting me be on this end.
I hope that
playing my role. Yeah.
I hope that how this is put together in the end is you all find interesting as much as I do, and
it'll
getting
nice.
to know who people out there. And
Yeah, maybe we gotta have you interview a board next time.
oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll ask him.
Okay.
Tonight. Yeah.
I like that.
Anyway, thanks for giving me your time.
Thank you.
Today. Yeah, no, it was
Antonio.
good. It was
I
good.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, it's nice to have all those voices that are in my head sort of come out and answer questions.
Yeah.
So anyway, I appreciate the walk and the talk. So until next time.
It's a good way to spend the day.
Yes. Now we're sitting in the sun, sweating. So, all right, we'll wrap this up and figure out the next time we hook up.
Oh, look at the pigeon now.
Yeah. Oh, we got to get the pigeon. Yeah. Wait. Hang on. All right. So let me hit stop on the. Thank you for that. Shit.
Yeah. No, it was great.
Well, here we are on the High Line, staring at a giant pigeon. It's about the size of, I don't know, what did you say? It's like an SUV, bigger.
Yeah.
bigger.
No, a van.
A van, big van.
Yeah.
Thing's huge. It's got to be 2 stories high. It's painted. It's got those. It's got lizard feet. If you ever doubted that dinosaurs were
the
turned into
feet-
birds,
I think the feet look a little bit, maybe too oversized, but
oversized for pigeons.
yeah, maybe I don't know.
Maybe, but they're certainly robust.
That's
Like a lot of
for
scaly skin.
yeah.
It's actually beautiful. The paint job on it is very
I know.
nice. Yeah,
Very nice.
I hope it stays here.
Well, it's definitely this and the rat are definitely emblems of New York City.
Yeah,